A powerful CEO thought his life was perfectly under control, until a little girl walked into his office carrying a baby and calmly said, "You're my dad. Our mom just died." Andrew Hale's office was perched at the top of a glass tower, a sleek corner suite that overlooked the vast, structured city of Chicago like the command center of a man who controlled everything. The walls were white, the furniture minimal, the air crisp and silent. Everything in that space was deliberate, calculated, and polished, just like him. His curly blonde hair was cut with precision, and his ice blue eyes reflected the cool efficiency with which he ran his international investment firm. At 38, he was one of the most respected CEOs in the financial world, a man known for logic, order, and results, not emotion. That morning had been like any other. His assistant handed him a fresh espresso and a stack of reports. His phone buzzed with international time zone calls. His schedule was airtight, down to the minute. Until something happened that no calendar, no strategy, and no quarterly projection could have prepared him for. A soft knock came at his door, followed by his assistant's uncertain voice. "Sir. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a child here. She says she's your daughter." Andrew didn't even look up at first. He assumed it was a mistake or some publicity stunt, something that could be handled by security or PR. But then the door opened before he could respond, and everything inside him shifted. A little girl, maybe 7, stepped inside with the kind of calm that made the air in the room still. She had curly blonde hair that framed her small face and striking blue eyes that made his heart stutter. In her arms, she carried a baby, no more than 8 months old, who rested against her shoulder, blinking slowly, clutching her shirt with tiny fingers. The girl looked up at Andrew with more strength than any child should need and said in a voice that didn't tremble, "My name is Lily. This is my brother, Ben. Our mom died last week in the hospital. She told me you're my dad. She said if anything happened to her, I should come find you." Andrew stared at her, completely unprepared for the way her words punched through him. He didn't move. He didn't speak. His mind tried to catch up, tried to make sense of the image in front of him, the girl, the baby, the voice that echoed with loss and quiet certainty. Lily shifted her weight and looked down at Ben, then back up. "I know this is weird. But we didn't have anywhere else to go. She said you're the only one who wouldn't leave us. It wasn't a performance. She wasn't there to manipulate or beg. She was simply surviving, doing exactly what her mother told her. And something about her, the way she held her brother, the way her chin didn't shake even though she was clearly scared, cut through the hardened shell Andrew had spent years building around his life. He stood slowly, his hands trembling just slightly, and walked around the desk. He crouched down, still unsure what to say. "What was your mother's name?" he asked softly. "Madeline," Lily replied. "Madeline Carter. You knew her a long time ago. She said you wouldn't remember. But he did." The name hit him like a blow to the chest. Boston. 8 years ago. They'd met at a conference, spent a handful of months together. She was warm and strong-willed and honest in a way most people in his world weren't. He'd left for a promotion in Chicago, never called, never wrote. There were no fights, no closure, just silence. He never knew. Not a word. Not a clue. The baby whimpered. Lily rocked him gently and whispered, "It's okay, Ben. He's here now." Andrew's heart clenched. The surreal moment stretched around him like a dream he couldn't wake from. He didn't know what this meant, what would happen next, or even how to begin. But one thing was clear. His world had just changed forever. Andrew didn't speak for a long moment. The silence in the office grew so dense it felt like time itself had paused. Lily shifted from one foot to the other, adjusting the baby in her arms. Ben let out a small, tired sound, and she instinctively bounced him, her movements confident and careful, far too practiced for a girl her age. That was the detail that pierced through the fog in Andrew's mind, the way she carried him, not like a child playing mother, but like someone who had done it 100 times out of necessity. She was not pretending. She was surviving. Andrew finally straightened up and gestured toward the couch in the corner of his office. "Come sit," he said, and his voice surprised him. It was softer than usual, quiet and unsure. Lily hesitated, then walked over and carefully settled onto the edge of the couch, still holding Ben as if setting him down would break something neither of them could afford to lose. Andrew poured a glass of water and handed it to her. She took it, mumbled "thank you," and took a small sip. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, trying to gather thoughts that refused to form cleanly. "Lily," he began, then paused. "How did you get here? Did someone bring you?" "No," she said, looking down at the floor. "We were staying in a shelter after the hospital. One of the volunteers helped me figure out where to go. Mom had written down your name and this address in her notebook, so I just followed it. We took a bus. Then we walked." "You came here alone?" he asked, stunned. She nodded. "It wasn't far. Only 3 buses. I've done harder things." That sentence made Andrew feel like the air had been knocked out of him. What kind of life had she lived already, where taking 3 buses across a city while carrying a baby wasn't even close to the hardest thing? He felt anger rising in his chest, not at her, or even at Madeline, but at the impossible burden placed on this child. And guilt, too, low and heavy in his gut, because even if he hadn't known, some part of him had chosen not to ask, not to wonder what had happened to her after he left. "Did your mother tell you anything else about me?" he asked gently. Lily met his gaze then. Her eyes were clear and steady. "She said you were smart. That you worked in a big office and helped build things. She said you didn't know about me, but that maybe if you did, you'd care. And if not, that I should be brave anyway." Andrew swallowed hard. Madeline. Always stronger than he'd given her credit for. Even in the final moments of her life, she had trusted him with something this enormous. And now here he was, sitting in front of a child who was his daughter, trying to find a place to start. He asked if she had eaten. She shook her head. He called down to his assistant, told her to order lunch, anything warm and comforting, kid-friendly. Then he stood awkwardly, unsure of what else to do. Lily spoke again. "Are you going to send us somewhere?" Her voice was very quiet, almost too quiet. "Like to a foster home or something?" The question tore something open in him. He turned to her, the answer instant. "No. You're not going anywhere." She nodded but said nothing. Ben stirred and let out a small cry. Lily reached into the worn backpack at her feet and pulled out a bottle. Andrew watched her warm it with practiced efficiency, then gently feed the baby. The sight did something to him. It broke whatever emotional distance he had left. Without realizing it, he sat down beside her, not saying anything, just watching as she cradled her brother and whispered to him. He didn't know what he was doing. He had no idea how to raise a child, let alone 2. But somehow, in that moment, the idea of not trying was unthinkable. He leaned back, exhaled slowly, and looked at her again. "We'll figure this out. Together." Lily gave him a look, still cautious, still wary, but for the first time since she'd walked through his door, her shoulders relaxed just a little. And Andrew, for the first time in his life, stopped caring about the meeting he was missing, the reports left unread, the shareholders waiting on his call. All that mattered now sat beside him, feeding a baby and hoping she wouldn't be turned away. Andrew didn't return to his usual routine after that day. In fact, he barely glanced at his schedule. Everything that had once dictated his life, investor briefings, profit forecasts, endless strategy sessions, had been eclipsed by a 7-year-old girl and a baby with wide, dark eyes who depended entirely on her. That night, he cleared his guest suite in the penthouse, called in his housekeeper to bring clean linens and extra blankets, and stood awkwardly as Lily explored the unfamiliar space. She didn't say much, just placed Ben gently on the bed and began to unpack their things. There wasn't much. A worn backpack with some diapers, a faded blanket, 2 shirts, and a photo of Madeline. Andrew recognized her immediately. The picture showed her sitting on a park bench, smiling at the camera, sunlight in her hair. She looked tired, but happy. He wondered who had taken it, if Lily had been the one holding the phone. Lily didn't ask any questions about the penthouse. She didn't marvel at the view or the expensive rugs or the polished countertops. She simply asked where the bathroom was and if she could have a towel for Ben. Andrew showed her, then stood there a moment too long, unsure if she needed privacy or help. She didn't say anything more, so he left the room quietly and walked into his own bedroom, which had never felt so cold. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing in his office, clutching her brother like she'd been doing it forever. The image of her tiny arms holding up a baby. The quiet strength in her voice. The letter from Madeline haunted him. She hadn't asked him for anything in all those years. She hadn't chased him down or begged for help. And now, her last request, one that came only after her death, was in his care. He had always prided himself on being a man who never failed. But this? This felt like failing on a level he had never even considered. The next morning was a strange mix of tenderness and panic. Ben cried early, and Lily was already awake, bouncing him gently in her arms while standing barefoot in the hallway. Andrew, still groggy, offered to hold him, and Lily hesitated only a second before handing him over. Ben was warm and heavier than he looked. He studied Andrew's face curiously, then promptly spit up on his shirt. Andrew laughed, more from shock than amusement, and Lily looked startled before covering her mouth to stifle a giggle. It was the first time he'd seen her laugh. Breakfast was another first. Andrew had no idea what children ate. He poured cereal into 3 bowls, added milk, and set them on the counter like it was a business transaction. Lily eyed the setup, took a cautious bite, then nodded in approval. Ben gnawed on a teething ring and smeared applesauce across his face. Andrew sat across from them, watching this little scene unfold in what had always been a space of silence. He realized he didn't miss the silence. Later that day, he contacted a lawyer to start the process of guardianship. He was told there would be a home visit, background checks, interviews. Andrew didn't care. He would do whatever it took. He also called a private pediatrician to examine Ben, and a child therapist to meet with Lily, just to make sure she had someone to talk to. He wasn't sure if it was too much or not enough, but it was a start. When the doctor arrived to examine Ben, Lily stayed close, watching every movement. At one point, when the nurse tried to take Ben's temperature, Lily gently corrected her grip. "He doesn't like it that way. You have to talk to him while you do it, or he gets scared." The nurse looked surprised, but adjusted accordingly. Andrew felt something swell in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or awe. Or something he didn't yet have a name for. That evening, Lily helped him prepare a bottle and showed him how to hold it just right. "Not too flat," she instructed. "It gives him gas." Andrew followed every direction like it was gospel. When Ben finally fell asleep in his arms, Lily curled up on the other end of the couch with a book. They sat like that in a quiet that was no longer empty, but full of meaning. As the city lights blinked outside the window and the hum of traffic faded into the distance, Andrew looked at the 2 children beside him and realized something that terrified and comforted him all at once. He didn't know how to be a father, but he was already becoming one anyway. It was only a few days after Lily and Ben moved into Andrew's penthouse, but already, everything had changed. The once silent apartment now had a rhythm, a heartbeat that pulsed with baby squeals, quiet laughter, and soft footsteps in the early morning hours. Andrew had always lived alone. He liked order, minimalism, control. Now, there were small socks drying on the towel rack, a pacifier left on his desk beside financial reports, and hand-drawn pictures taped to the fridge with magnets shaped like animals. He found himself adjusting more quickly than he expected. Not because it was easy, but because it suddenly mattered. Every day brought something unfamiliar. Andrew, who once negotiated mergers worth hundreds of millions without hesitation, now stood in the baby aisle of a grocery store completely lost, staring at shelves of formula, wipes, and diapers with no idea what to buy. He had called Lily from the store and asked, "Do we need the purple one or the blue one?" and she had calmly responded, "Blue." He doesn't like the purple. It smells weird. That small call had made him smile for the rest of the afternoon. Lily, for her part, was still guarded. She was polite and mature far beyond her years, but she rarely volunteered anything about herself or her past. She took care of Ben like a second mother and seemed to be always alert, always waiting for something, or someone, to fail her. Andrew began to notice that she never relaxed fully, even when she smiled. It was as if she carried an invisible weight, one she had gotten used to but could never quite set down. One evening, after Ben had fallen asleep and Lily was brushing her teeth, Andrew passed by her room and noticed her sitting at the edge of the bed, staring out the window. He hesitated at the doorway and knocked gently on the frame. "You okay?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Lily turned her head slightly but didn't answer at first. Then, after a pause, she said, "You didn't ask about my mom." Andrew stepped into the room and sat down at the foot of the bed, leaving space between them. "I wanted to," he admitted, "but I wasn't sure if you were ready to talk." "She got sick fast," Lily said. "At first it was just coughing. Then she couldn't breathe right. We went to the clinic, but it was always crowded. She didn't want to go to the hospital because we didn't have insurance. When she finally did, it was already too late." Andrew's stomach clenched. He felt the failure in that moment, his failure, even if he hadn't known. He had the resources, the means to have helped her, and yet she had died alone in a hospital bed while raising his daughter. He swallowed hard and didn't try to interrupt her. "She wrote your name on a card and told me where to go. She said if anything happened to her, I had to find you because she didn't trust anyone else. Not after what happened with Ben's dad." Andrew looked at her then. "Can I ask, what did happen with him?" Lily's expression changed. It tightened, the way someone's might when they try to hold back from crying but don't want to show it. "He left when Mom told him she was pregnant. He was angry. Said it wasn't his problem. He yelled a lot. She didn't talk about him after that." "I'm sorry," Andrew said quietly. "That's not something you should have had to carry." "She was strong," Lily said. "She always smiled in front of Ben. She made up songs for him, even when she was tired. When she couldn't get out of bed, she made me promise to keep singing." Andrew nodded slowly, the lump in his throat growing. He reached out, unsure, and placed a gentle hand over hers. She didn't pull away. "You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore," he said. "You have me now. You and Ben both." She looked up at him, and for a moment, her blue eyes looked even younger. "What if you change your mind?" "I won't," he said without hesitation. "You can ask me that 100 times, and the answer will always be the same." Lily didn't say anything else. But she leaned just slightly against his arm as they sat in silence, and he knew something important had shifted. That night, Andrew didn't fall asleep reviewing numbers or thinking about strategy. He lay awake replaying every moment he could remember of Madeline, wondering what kind of strength it took to raise 2 children alone, to protect them, to prepare them for a future without her. And he made himself a promise, not just to take care of her kids, but to become the man she must have hoped he would be when she sent them to him. The official paperwork came faster than Andrew expected. Within days, his legal team had secured temporary guardianship over both Lily and Ben, and the first visit from Child Protective Services was scheduled. He had prepared for the worst, long delays, bureaucratic resistance, or skeptical caseworkers, but instead, everyone involved seemed almost relieved that the children had found their way to someone who clearly wanted them. Andrew had spared no expense in turning his penthouse into something resembling a home. What had once been minimalist and sterile now had color, softness, and warmth in nearly every corner. There were baby gates at the stairs, children's books stacked beside coffee table art books, and framed finger paintings already appearing on his walls like badges of honor. But it wasn't the transformation of his space that marked the biggest change, it was what was happening inside of him. He had always measured success in metrics, numbers, contracts, growth. Now he began measuring time differently. How long it took to warm Ben's bottle to the perfect temperature. How many tries it took to tie Lily's shoelaces just right. How many seconds passed before she laughed at one of his terrible jokes. His schedule adjusted, not out of obligation, but desire. Morning meetings were pushed to noon, late-night calls declined with a firm, "I have to get home to my kids." And he said it that way, my kids without even thinking twice. One weekend morning, he woke up earlier than usual to find Lily already awake, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a book in her lap. She looked up at him and said, "You snore a little." He laughed, made a face, and promised to work on it. She grinned, and he realized it was becoming more frequent, that smile. It no longer looked borrowed or cautious. It was starting to feel like hers. Later that day, after a long walk in the park with Ben bundled in the stroller and Lily skipping ahead along the path, Andrew sat with her at a bench and asked gently, "Would you be okay if I told the court I want to adopt Ben?" Lily looked up from her juice box. There was no confusion in her eyes, only a slow, serious awareness. She nodded. "He doesn't know anyone else," she said. "You're his only real dad." Then, after a pause, she added, "And mine too." The words hit him harder than he expected. He looked away for a moment, pretending to adjust the stroller, just to keep his composure. It wasn't that he needed her validation. But hearing it, that quiet acknowledgement from a girl who had every reason not to trust him, meant everything. They went home that afternoon and built a pillow fort in the living room. Ben squealed with excitement as Lily tossed blankets through the air, and Andrew crawled on the floor beside them, pretending to be a monster and then a prince, depending on what the story required. For hours, they existed in a world of giggles and imagination, and when the fort finally collapsed under the weight of their laughter, Andrew found himself lying on the carpet, staring up at the ceiling, with Ben asleep on his chest and Lily resting against his shoulder. In that moment, he thought of Madeline, not with guilt or regret, but with deep, quiet gratitude. She had given them love, strength, and a compass to follow when the world fell apart. And when she could no longer carry them, she trusted him to do it. Now, Andrew realized, he wasn't just filling the space she left behind. He was building something new, something rooted in her love, but reshaped by his own. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, she looked at him and said, "You're not what I thought a dad would be." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" She smiled sleepily. "Good. You're learning." Then she rolled over and fell asleep, just like that. Andrew stood there for a while, watching her breathe. The weight of his old life, the suits, the power, the polished detachment, felt like a distant echo. He was still that man, in some ways, but now he was something more. A father. A protector. A man who, for the first time, didn't feel empty when the world outside his windows went dark. The rhythm of their new life was beginning to feel natural, almost effortless in some moments, even though Andrew knew he was still learning everything as he went. He had started calling it ours, our mornings, our routine, our home, and neither Lily nor Ben seemed to question it. Lily had fully adjusted to her new school, her backpack now hung on a hook by the door instead of being hidden in a corner. She didn't flinch when Andrew said he would pick her up, and she didn't ask if he'd remember. She just waited outside the school gates, smiling when she saw him. And Ben, who once cried every time he was handed to someone new, now lit up when Andrew entered the room, lifting his arms with trust and certainty. Andrew had fallen into this new world without hesitation, and though every day came with its own set of challenges, he found himself looking forward to each one in a way he never had before. But then something unexpected happened. One rainy afternoon, just as Andrew was finishing a call in his office, his receptionist buzzed him with a strange tone in her voice. "There's a man here asking to see you," she said. "He says it's about the child." Ben. Andrew froze. It had been months since Lily first told him about Ben's father, the man who had left Madeline when she was pregnant, who never came back, who never wanted anything to do with the baby. There had been no sign of him since. No legal claims, no inquiries, no threats. Until now. Andrew told his assistant to send the man up. He didn't want to involve Lily until he understood what was happening. When the elevator doors opened, a tall man in his early 30s stepped into the office, wearing a smug, too confident expression. His clothes were expensive but worn with a kind of practiced recklessness, and his eyes scanned the room with a look that made Andrew instantly uneasy. The man extended a hand. "Name's Marcus," he said. "I'm Ben's father." Andrew didn't shake his hand. Instead, he asked calmly, "Why are you here now?" Marcus shrugged. "I heard through some people that Maddie passed. Tragic, really. Thought I'd see how the kid's doing. Maybe see about getting him back." Andrew didn't blink. "You abandoned him. You never signed a birth certificate. You've never paid a dime or made contact." Marcus smiled in a way that sent a chill down Andrew's spine. "Yeah, well. People make mistakes. I've had time to think, clean myself up, get some perspective. And I heard the guy taking care of him now, he's worth a hell of a lot of money. Makes me wonder if I've been missing out." It wasn't grief or guilt on his face. It was greed. Andrew felt his hands clench. "If you're trying to extort me," he said, "you picked the wrong man." Marcus leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed. "I'm not saying anything. Just letting you know I'm looking into my rights. Biological parent and all. Unless, of course, we can come to some sort of understanding." Andrew ended the meeting immediately and had security escort Marcus out. But the damage was done. A man like that didn't go away quietly. Within days, Andrew's lawyer received notice, Marcus was filing a paternity claim. Suddenly, everything that felt stable became fragile again. Andrew didn't tell Lily right away. He needed time to prepare, to understand what Marcus was really after, and to make sure they were protected legally and emotionally. But the weight of that secret began to grow heavier by the day. One night, after Ben had fallen asleep and Lily was finishing homework at the kitchen counter, she looked up and said, "Something's wrong. You're quieter." Andrew considered lying. But Lily was too perceptive for that. He sat down next to her, his hands folded on the table. "Someone came to see me this week," he said gently. "A man who says he's Ben's biological father." Lily didn't react right away. She kept her eyes on him, trying to read the meaning between his words. "Is he trying to take Ben?" "He says he is," Andrew admitted. "But we're going to fight it. Legally. Completely. He has no real claim." Lily's jaw tightened. "He never wanted Ben. He left Mom crying on the kitchen floor. She said he was cruel. He only shows up now because you're here." Andrew reached for her hand. "He won't win. I promise. No one's taking Ben from you. Or from me." She nodded, but he could see the fear behind her eyes. The same fear that used to live in her posture, in the way she checked doors twice, in how she flinched when someone raised their voice on TV. And now it was back. That night, when he tucked her into bed, she asked quietly, "What if the court doesn't care about what's right?" Andrew sat beside her, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and said, "Then we show them what love looks like. What family looks like. And we don't give up." She didn't reply, but she wrapped her arms around him tighter than usual. And in that moment, Andrew knew this was no longer about legal paperwork or courtrooms. It was about proving, to the world and to these children, that love meant showing up, even when the past came knocking. The court date came faster than Andrew had hoped. The legal system moved quickly, not because it cared, but because a case involving money and potential press tended to attract attention. Marcus had hired a flashy attorney, someone who clearly knew how to stir doubt and play the public angle. Andrew, on the other hand, had built a case on truth, on stability, and on the proof that he had been Ben's only real parent from the moment Madeline died. His lawyers had prepared everything: financial records, pediatrician statements, school reports, character witnesses. But none of that changed the fact that a biological connection, however weak, still held legal weight. The law didn't care that Marcus had abandoned Madeline. It cared only that he was blood. In the days leading up to the hearing, the tension in the house shifted. Lily was quiet again, watching every move Andrew made, clinging to Ben more than usual. Andrew tried to reassure her, tried to keep the routine steady, but he felt it too. The unspoken fear that someone could show up out of nowhere, claim what wasn't his, and tear their new life apart. One night, while folding laundry on the couch, Lily finally said what had been pressing on her chest for days. "If they give him Ben, I won't go. I'll run away with him. I swear, I will." Andrew stopped what he was doing and turned to her, gently but firmly. "No one is going to take Ben. I would fight to the very end for both of you. But we do this the right way. Together." She didn't speak again, but she nodded, and he saw in her face that she was preparing for the worst, even if she didn't want to believe it could happen. The day of the hearing, they dressed in quiet silence. Lily wore the dress Madeline had given her for her 6th birthday, slightly small now but still her favorite. Andrew wore a navy suit, not for show, but because he needed to feel steady. Ben, too young to understand anything, gurgled happily in the car seat, unaware of the storm building around him. When they arrived at the courthouse, the marble steps and wide pillars made everything feel colder, heavier. Inside, Andrew met his attorney and was briefed one last time. Marcus was already there, standing by the elevators, all charm and false confidence. He winked at Andrew as they passed. Andrew ignored him. The courtroom was smaller than Andrew expected. Intimate. Uncomfortably so. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a measured voice, opened the session with formality. The opposing attorney painted Marcus as a man who had made mistakes, but was now ready to step up and do the right thing. He talked about second chances, about biological rights, and made veiled suggestions that Andrew, with all his wealth, might have seen Ben as a project, a redemption effort rather than a child. When it was Andrew's turn, he stood and spoke not as a businessman, but as a father. He told the court how Ben had come to him, how he had learned to hold a bottle, to soothe colic, to translate baby sounds into needs. He spoke of Lily, and how she had trusted him slowly, how she had taught him how to be someone worth trusting. He said he hadn't planned to become a parent, but the moment those 2 children walked into his office, something inside him changed forever. Then Lily was called to speak. She stood on the witness stand in her too small dress with her hands folded tightly in front of her. Her voice shook at first, but when she looked at Andrew, her shoulders straightened. "He never wanted Ben," she said clearly. "He yelled at our mom and said he didn't care. But Andrew was there when no one else was. He takes care of Ben. He wakes up when he cries. He sings to him. He shows up every day. He's our dad. Not because of blood. Because he chose us." The courtroom was quiet. The judge didn't show emotion, but she didn't interrupt either. Lily stepped down and walked back to the bench, sitting beside Andrew, who took her hand gently. The decision didn't come right away. The judge recessed for nearly an hour. They waited in a small room with soft lighting and bad coffee, the silence only broken by Ben babbling to himself. Then the court officer opened the door and summoned them back. The judge looked at Marcus, then at Andrew. She began slowly, reviewing the facts, the legal standards, the precedents. And then, finally, she ruled. Custody of the minor child, Benjamin Carter, is hereby awarded in full to Mr. Andrew Hale. The petition for parental rights filed by Mr. Marcus Lang is denied on grounds of abandonment, lack of support, and the overwhelming best interest of the child. Andrew exhaled. Lily squeezed his hand, but neither of them spoke. Not yet. Marcus stood up, barked something under his breath about an appeal, but his lawyer touched his shoulder and shook his head. There would be no appeal. The case was closed. When they walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun, Andrew finally turned to Lily. "It's over." She looked at him, eyes wide, and whispered, "He's really ours?" He nodded. And for the first time, she burst into tears, not quiet, hidden ones, but open sobs of relief and release. Andrew knelt down, pulled her and Ben into his arms, and held them close. This time, no one could take them away. Spring arrived quietly, the kind that crept in through half-open windows with the smell of new leaves and rain-washed concrete. Life had settled into something steady, something whole, and though there were still early mornings filled with spilled juice and forgotten homework and toddler tantrums, Andrew had never known a steadier kind of happiness. The court ruling had changed everything, not just legally, but emotionally. The fear that had hung over them like a shadow was gone. They didn't talk about Marcus anymore. They didn't need to. That door had closed, and none of them were interested in reopening it. Andrew finalized Ben's adoption within weeks of the hearing. The ceremony was small and private, just a courtroom, a smiling judge, and a photographer who captured the exact moment when Andrew signed the papers and Lily wrapped both arms around him, whispering, "We did it," in his ear. Ben clapped without knowing why, but his laughter filled the room like music. On the car ride home, they stopped for ice cream, and Lily insisted they order an extra cup for her mom. She would have liked mint chocolate, she said softly, leaving the cup by a flower bed outside the building when they got home. Their apartment no longer resembled the cold, immaculate space it once was. It was alive now, transformed not just by furniture but by meaning. Andrew's once pristine office now doubled as a homework station, with colored pencils tucked between reports and sticky notes that read, "Lily Math Test Thursday." The guest room had become Ben's nursery, painted a pale blue with stars on the ceiling and a bookshelf full of bedtime stories. Lily's room was full of light and laughter, a mix of framed drawings, string lights, and the quiet kind of peace that came when a child finally believed they were safe. Andrew had changed, too. He still wore tailored suits and negotiated contracts worth millions, but he did so with a softness he'd never known he was capable of. He took calls from boardrooms while tying shoelaces. He learned how to braid hair from a YouTube video at 6 a.m. He made pancakes every Saturday, badly, but with heart. His colleagues noticed it. His voice on conference calls had changed. He wasn't colder, just human. And his priorities were no longer abstract numbers but two children who had once walked into his office and quietly rewritten the story of his life. One Sunday afternoon, they were in the park. Ben had just taken his first wobbly steps across the grass, and Lily had squealed so loudly that other families turned to smile. Andrew scooped the boy up in his arms and spun him in a slow circle while Lily snapped pictures on his phone. They collapsed into the grass afterward, breathless from laughing, their fingers tangled together, faces red from sun and joy. As they sat beneath a tree, Lily leaned against Andrew's side and asked, "Do you think Mom sees us?" Andrew looked up at the branches swaying above them. "I do," he said. "I think she sent you to me when I didn't even know I needed you." Lily smiled. "I think we saved you too." He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You did," he said. "In every way that matters." The sun began to dip, the light turning golden as the world slowed down around them. Ben dozed off in Andrew's lap, fingers still curled around a blade of grass. Lily hummed a tune her mother used to sing, soft and low, and Andrew closed his eyes for a moment, breathing it all in. They weren't perfect, not by any means. But they were together. They were home. And that, he finally understood, was everything.